Hi, my name is Stephanie Park, and I'm a senior workplace strategist at WeWork. I think many of you probably know about WeWork, but just for those of you who might not know, wait, do I have a clicker? Or is the computer?
Yeah, it's there. The remote's on the other side.
This one?
There, you could use
This
that
one?
too, yeah. See if that works.
No, it does. Okay, cool. So WeWork started as a company providing co-working spaces to startups, entrepreneurs, small companies. We've grown now and also have large enterprise companies that we provide flexible spaces and also design their own space. The main focus of WeWork services has always been on kind of building the community. So we help bringing people together by constantly evolving the experience to deliver the most positive impact. So we also leverage our global spaces and members to better understand the human behavior and how we can deliver the optimal experience. And so we also do not only provide a workplace, but also provide retail space, wellness space, also a residential product called We Live, which I will talk about later in one of our projects, case studies. Just something unique about WeWork is that we design the space, we also operate the space, so it's really important to us to keep learning about how people are using the space and responding to the space. So that's something that we focus on as we research the users. And one of the most important things is to build a community, so we spend a lot of time understanding how people interact with each other, which this presentation is about. So before I talk about the specific case studies on interactions, I want to talk a little bit about how I started thinking about the role of built environment and the human experience and how we approach studying them. Just a brief introduction about my background. I studied architecture and cognitive psychology as an undergrad and got my master's in data science, so you can imagine that this conference is kind of like my dream come true. And I'm always excited to connect with people who share the same passion, so it's always exciting for me to come back to this conference. So thank you. Anyway, so back when I was an architecture student, I came across Arakawa and Gin's work on reversible destiny. They took a philosophical approach to incorporate neuroscientific ideas in their process. So every surface has a different slope, every space is vibrantly colored, and every furniture is located at an unexpected place, even the light switch, because they believe that having unexpected contrasting elements that led to constant neural stimulation in the brain, the users would sharpen themselves neurologically and therefore would live forever. Unfortunately, they both passed away a few years ago, so that theory didn't live up to the truth, but I love this example because it's such an amazing attempt at influencing the physiological state of the user at such holistic experience level. So I started thinking about different approaches to understand the impact of the environment and how we go about studying them. And first, you can think about breaking down the experience into every single moment and try to measure that moment, right? Or we can think about movement, such as transfer of knowledge, interaction that happen between people, or movement throughout the space. Or you can think about the experience as a holistic thing and think about the overall impact on that experience. So thinking about specific moment, there are studies that get really detailed in order to define a specific moment. So Dane's study on perceived enclosedness uses 3 basic spatial elements: floor, wall, ceiling, to measure someone's perceived feeling of enclosedness. So if you're thinking about the exact moment right now, and think of all the spatial qualities that are in this room, and if you knew what response you had to each of those elements, you can understand the impact. You can kind of start to think how to measure that specific moment. So the walls, the floors, ceiling, colors, the chairs, people you're sitting next to, where I'm standing, what's on the wall, all of that. So if you knew your response to every single element, that kind of defines your moment. So I started to map out what are some of the existing studies that were done on these elements, for example, in a learning space. The famous studies on the ceiling study that says higher ceiling leads to more creativity, or stuff on the wall affects the child's performance on doing certain tasks. And there are also a lot of studies on different seating arrangement, the location of the teacher or boss or the speaker on a person's perception and emotional experience. So this study was to really imagine what other neurological study that can be done to understand every single aspect in that moment. But we know that it's not necessarily about defining every single moment, simply just summing them up. So maybe it's about the movements that happen, how you interact with other people, form a network, transfer information or knowledge. There are social network theories that help us understand what kinds of networks are formed and what different channels determine how we interact with each other. And that can even help us to understand what kind of environment fosters most productive or efficient way of working or learning. So maybe it's a combination of those movements that we should measure. But at the end of the day, what we really care about is the impact on the holistic experience. So I want to talk about two projects that try to understand and measure a specific impact. So first study is, it was initially done about 10 years ago by MIT lab using the humanized badge. If you're not familiar with the humanized badge, it's basically a badge that kind of records the audio, and it acknowledges another badge that's facing you, so that if you're having a conversation with someone and you're facing that person and you guys are both wearing the badge, it will recognize it as an interaction. And the data set is available publicly, so you can download it, and which is why I use it for this analysis. And then the interaction, in this study, the interaction was measured against their performance, which was defined by specific tasks they completed. So it was an IT company, and they had like number of tasks to complete. So it was based on how many tasks that you completed and how difficult each task was. So that's what they kind of determined as like the performance or productivity during that time. In order to attempt to define the social interactions within that data set, I've analyzed interactions that occurred in the common areas, such as a small pantry and kitchen. The sensor data included interaction and specific information about a person, such as a department and position. And the original study suggested, employees with higher amount of and variety of interaction, which meaning you are interacting with people outside of your department, had better performance. And given the limited nature of this study, when I specifically analyzed the social interaction, there was a correlation, but it was not significant. But this was a great beginning, a step to understand what approach we can take to learn about how people interact with each other and how that impacts their performance. The second study is a really interesting one. It was done our We Live space that I mentioned before, which is a flexible residential space with focus on building a community. So in We Live, you have your typical apartment space with basic things like kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, living room, but also there are larger communal areas that you share with other people in that building. There's one in New York and another one in DC and others to come. So building on the Stinger study on proximity and building relationships, we know that the closer you live with someone, the more likely you're going to build a friendship. So in the We Live space, the buildings are kind of in different neighborhoods, which is in different colors here. So basically, those neighborhoods are connected by a communal space, a communal staircase. The communal staircase are these like wide staircases that are adjacent to large communal areas, a communal kitchen and communal seating space. So we perform a various engagement with our residents to understand the impact of these vertical stairs on the neighborhoods. So in this study, we asked people to identify people that they had built friendship with over the course of their time at We Live. And the diagram shows the network of those people. And not surprisingly, they were more likely to form friendship with someone on their floor than others. But also, residents were more likely to be friends with residents in their neighborhood who are connected by the stairs than others that are in other neighborhoods. And more than 50% of friendship occurred within the neighborhood. And during the study, a communal kitchen was identified as the most common social place for the residents to form these friendships. So this was an exciting start of our approach to understand how people interact with each other and form meaningful relationships in a given environment. So while these were some of the ways that we can approach studying in interactions in the space with specific impact in mind, there are other aspects of the experience that we're currently studying to understand the holistic experience. So we gather a lot of user feedback from our members and clients to understand their physical and emotional response to different environments using typical methodologies such as surveys, interviews, and some other ones like virtual reality studies. And the point is that we keep doing these and continue to improve the experience, not just design it and kind of like leave them to be. And we gather, we collect data through sensors throughout all our spaces, and to understand how people use the space, we use our analytical tool to predict utilization of desk and collaboration spaces. Also use geographical data to understand the market and the needs of the people in that region. So what we learned from trying to digest tons of data that we gather on a daily basis, we learned that the key to having the most meaningful impact is to be really intentional about what you want the experience to feel like. In our case, was building the community, and then developing our design and operate solutions around them. So having a focus help us kind of make progress in our research. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions? Huda?
I thought that was very interesting. One of the areas that I wonder about is lab community, research communities under the WeWork concept. You know, a lot of people bring architects, universities, they build buildings for research, and then they have like administrators and bean counters and people like that who come and compute how much dollar per square foot there is, and then they play musical chairs and they collapse people and move people around, and scientists are always screaming bloody murder that, you know, I have collaborations, and they say, but it doesn't matter, you know, you can always reach out or walk one floor or whatever. But they really, I'm not aware of, or I would love to know if there is evidence about the actual importance of lab neighborhoods in these big buildings where multiple researchers, especially multidisciplinary research work. Is there data on how it affects your science, who your neighbors are, your research neighbors? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't specifically come across a research for like lab environment or a research environment, but I think the common thing that we constantly see across all our workplaces and other types of spaces is that when people feel the sense of purpose, they work better together, they are more productive, and they feel more effective, and they're more satisfied. So I think kind of having that collaboration or having the emphasis of community helps people kind of be reminded of the purpose that they're, and I'm sure that especially in a research environment, lab environment, that is something that's even more important to the scientists. So I imagine that that would be something. Yeah.
One question?
Who is your target end user? Who did you design for? Age group, background? So we have a different product. So there's WeWork, which is really for any demographics, but it does really focus on the aspect of bringing people together, being inclusive. So it really goes for any demographics. But our target is really broad, but most of our clients tend to be like tech companies or younger generation, but now we're working at law firms, we're working at financial services. So that's changing really fast. Do you think that would change your design? I think that our design is constantly evolving. I mean, our company is 8 years old, but it's already been so different in the past 3 years if you look at the evolution of our design. So I think we're constantly looking at that, but we're also looking at how we can have this space that's not just for millennials who are startups. You know, we really care about the inclusiveness of all the cultures and all the age groups. So that's something that we're definitely looking towards.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just remind everybody, vis-a-vis the last question, that ANFA very early in its existence actually held a number of workshops at different parts of the United States that dealt with some issues that you've been talking about, not as sophisticated as what you've done, but I would recommend everybody going to the website and take a look at the workshops. There's a lot of effort, and it was supported as well. So that is financially supported, and so we've done things on healthcare. We've done things on primary school education and the design of educational buildings, and a couple of other ones as well. I can't remember, but the lab workshop. Yeah, that was exactly. How could I forget that one? Which actually proved unexpected in what the findings were. Actually, it was part of this was supported by the Dana Foundation and other things. We haven't held any more of those, but there's a lot of really good information that would be worth everybody's time to look at it and see what you can see. And we had a little trouble a couple of years ago of how it was presented and how it was accessed, and I haven't looked recently, but if you have any problem trying to find them, you can certainly email me and we can try to see where we are on that. But there's a lot of information that's available, and it just reminded me from now, all these years later, everybody is trying to do it individually, but ANFA thought about this a long time ago. So thank you very much. We have a